Hi, my name is Dominic, and I will be speaking today primarily on the issue of immigration policy. So, as my visual, I created a brochure that illustrates my solution for the current immigration struggles that we have in the country. My brochure is titled Immigration Solutions for Change and entails a mission statement, a why, a how, a proposal, and the history of the issue. So I'm going to jump right into our mission statement, which says our mission is to enforce an efficient means of immigration that reduce the need for illegal entry into the U.S. So basically, with my new proposal, our goals is to create a smooth transition for refugees to seek asylum in the U.S. that benefit not only the economy, the refugees itself, as well as the safety of the current U.S. citizens. The new proposal will create a better means of monitoring all immigrants, which will help with the safety of the citizens, making sure that that is still the primary focus with allowing immigrants to enter the U.S., and as well as reducing government spending on things such as border patrol and putting the taxpayers' money to better use to provide a smoother transition for the immigrants. So, why is the immigration policy an important issue? Let's be honest. The U.S.'s immigration policy is kind of choppy right now, and it doesn't really benefit. It doesn't give much benefit to both the immigrants themselves and as well as the government. For a fact, it's 361,308 people alone were detained in the southwest border in just the year 2019, which is also a whopping 47% of those people were families with children under the age of 12. And for the economy aspect, the U.S. spends $324 billion on immigration control and border safety. And proper immigration control will reduce the need for much spending. So in order to fix some of these issues, I've created a proposal that kind of goes hand in hand with our mission statement, where it says, in order to move the boat in the right direction, we must make big waves and have a crew rowing in the same direction. Our new proposal will alter the current immigration strategy completely, but will be a positive remedy that will yield change. So basically, with this being said, this is a proposal that needs the collaborative support of the citizens, the president, and as well as a government to make these changes happen. So that's why I mentioned it needs a crew moving in the right direction, and it also needs a big risk, which is our big wave that will come in to change this immigration policy completely. So the first step in our proposal is I would like to implement specific agency hubs in refugee-heavy areas. So by this meaning, I know there's already refugee hubs out there, but I want to restructure them in the sense where it's a little bit more personalized to make the refugees feel that we're actually trying to help them, not as much making it more difficult for them to get into the U.S. So within these agency hubs, the refugees will be assigned specific agents that will kind of guide them as advisors throughout their process of getting into the U.S., whether that be providing them with help with paperwork, lawyers in court cases, making sure the safety of their family or any human right or food, shelter related needs are moving forward. Also, helping to speed up the process, knowing that you have someone that is focused on you and you only, not a giant government that has thousands and thousands of people to tend to before you and feel like you're just a number in the line. I also want to implement asylums within different regions, which will help with the current citizens kind of meet in the middle for some of the people that are iffy about immigration policy. These asylums will help monitor some of the refugees and also giving them a place to stay in the meantime while they're working to get their citizenship. Within these asylums, the refugees could be provided food, shelter, water, as well as education. And I would like to put them in multiple regions across the U.S. so they could be in the correct environment that they would be entering in the U.S. with once they gain citizenship. And it would be a maximum of 2 years in the asylum, just so they do not get overpopulated and standards get lowered, and so they don't feel trapped into the asylums. I would also like to jump over to the history of the immigration policy. So as of right now, the U.S. ranks in the bottom third in the world within the highest per capita GPA in immigration rate. As a nation that is striving to be at the very top of everything, that's just simply not doing it. Within our current and past immigration policies, they require an unrealistic quota of expectation for immigrants pursuing citizenship, which puts the immigrant at an automatic disadvantage of ever getting their citizenship just because they're requiring too much from them. For example, in 1994, California passed Proposition 187, which banned undocumented children from attending public schools and denied them public health services, which in fact is a violation of their human rights in the first place. And it put illegal immigrants at an automatic disadvantage, not even for just that generation, but for generations moving forward by not providing correct education and just safety rights for the children and the adults of those immigrants. There's also an unjust distribution of green cards based on demographics, which is also shown in the 1996 President Clinton administration passing the Immigrant Responsibility Act. This bill intended to make deportations easier and focus on immigrants with criminal convictions, which is shown in racial profiling of illegal immigrants, and it's just making deportations and family separations a lot easier for the U.S. And lastly, there's just a low congressional support of immigration, which is shown in President Trump's Zero Tolerance Act, which he is able to deport anyone under the suspicion of crime or if any crime was committed, and that strips families apart, and it just shows the lack of support that the U.S. has to their immigrants. So how are we going to get this proposal set into place? In order to set this proposal into action, we would need to restructure our immigration system. So in doing so, the first thing that we would need to do is to gain exposure of these issues and to bring them slowly but steadily up to a national level. So we will need to gain signatures to climb the ranks of counties, states, regions, and then national officials to be able to get the correct exposure we need to get this proposal set into action. Once we get this up to national funding, we would need to propose a restructure of funding for our immigration department. So what we would want to do is we would want to separate the funding for border control and then into these private agency hubs. We would want to put more of our money into these hubs that are going to help immigrants to get into the U.S. rather than sneaking in and becoming undocumented immigrants. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to get all our immigrants documented and citizens moving forward that will be passed on to generations of citizenship, rather than having undocumented immigrants. And lastly, we would like to create a UDHR approved immigration asylum in each region. And so that would be the building and the infrastructure of asylums that would be approved for UDHR standards, which would meet the correct shelter standards, the providing of food, water, education, and entertainment, and the basic fundamental needs, and also the human rights that people are born with, not only just from being in the U.S., but the human rights that they are born within all around the world. Those will be translated into the U.S. asylums as well. So this would conclude my brochure for my proposal on the immigration solutions. Underneath my Google Docs, I have a works cited of 6 peer-reviewed articles, as well as 3 open-ended questions for the class. One of them would be, how would we implement a new immigration policy without presidential support, which is probably the biggest question mark within my proposal, is how would we get the president to realize an issue that he does not necessarily believe in. So that's definitely a question that would need to be answered before we would be able to pursue this proposal. Another question is forcing immigrants in an asylum against the human rights? So this was tricky because I felt that I needed to adhere to some of the citizens of the U.S. that felt that were not as open about the immigration policy. So I felt the asylums were a way that immigrants would be able to pursue citizenship in the U.S. while being monitored, and the current citizens of the U.S. would have a peace of mind that their safety was not at risk. And then the last question would be, what if refugees did not have access to the hubs? Because in some areas across the world, there's a lot of turmoil and violence, and maybe those hubs might be overtaken and it might be hard to access. So that will conclude my presentation. Thank you.